Um, so, Lassiter's been close to having multiple state championships. You kind of talked about it. I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of coaching from 2006 and to 2010, and played in three. We do have something in common, winning it the first year we were there. So,
Yeah.
and then really close one year, losing in the semifinals. What do you think needs to happen to change that, to get Lassiter kind of over that hump? Because I just,
Yeah.
I'll say we, just because I've been able to be
Yeah.
coach there, but like, we've always kind of been close to that multiple times
Yeah.
of having that experience. What do you think needs to, I don't know, say change, or what's going to help them get over
Yeah.
that hump?
Yeah. It's an interesting one, man. And it's like, it's so, okay. So I think about it this way. When we evaluate businesses with symposia that, so like we work with like a venture capital group that'll come in and think about whether or not they're going to invest or inject capital into some business. One of the biggest things you look at is the moat. Like, what is their proprietary competitive advantage that nobody else can replicate? Well, for Lassiter, for a really long time, it was a youth program. It was the fact that we had a built-in wall. There was
Right,
all these different access to the AD would let you on the field, turf field.
right,
So for a long time, like the Trojans have had a pretty significant competitive advantage from a youth development standpoint. What we saw in 2017 was the last year of that being enough. And
gotcha.
so every year after that, you had to not only be just better at catching and throwing than the other teams, but you have to have a better scheme and you have to be as athletic. And I
Right.
think that's something that has been a roadblock for us, has been like kind of on the years where we've had the skills, we haven't quite had the athletes. And the years where we've had the athletes, maybe we haven't had the skills. Or when we've had both, we're missing maybe a specialist that's unbelievable, like a face-off guy where possession is very lopsided, or maybe in the goal, we had an injury or something like that. So
Right.
not to make excuses, but it's like, it really does, now that the playing field is a lot more even. And as you can see, there's a lot more diversity of champion. Obviously Lambert had an unbelievable run for like
Right.
8 years or something like that. But
Right.
outside of that, there's been a lot of different champions because those moats have really dried up and anybody
Yeah.
can win it. So what I think has to happen is number one, and this is what I spent a lot of my time doing, and folks who have kind of paid attention to the sort of youth lacrosse scene, not to extrapolate that out too far or project too far, because you never know who's going to pan out.
Right.
But our youth program is probably one of the most highly skilled and athletic groups in the state and has been for the last
Yeah.
4 years. So this year, our seniors was the first year, the 2025 class was my first year as director of the program. And what we decided to do that year was basically make it a priority to develop face-off guys, goalies, and then make sure that overall, just the standard of athlete that we were recruiting was very, very high. We also made the concerted effort to put our most dynamic athletes on attack and on defense and kind of put newer players in the midfield just because we felt like we kind of had a little bit of a bottleneck versus especially Lambert in those late 2000 years where their polls were just overwhelmingly athletic
Yeah.
compared to our attackmen. We just couldn't really separate.
Yeah.
So the answer is, it's a multi-planar sort of equation here, multi-variable equation where like you have to have a youth setup that's always going to precipitate elite specialists. You have to make sure you're really athletic, which is something that, at Lassiter, where the football program is like improving, but it's not nearly competitive versus a Lambert or a school of 3,000 kids like that.
Right.
You've got to make sure that you are retaining the best guys. And then you also have to, play the game with club ball and try and figure out like, what is the minimum effective dose, as we said before? Like what is the minimum viable product there for us to essentially compete in the Final Four? And our kids at Lassiter since about 2017 have participated less and less and less in high level club ball, partially because the prices have raised astronomically. And it's
Sure.
literally probably an $18,000 to $20,000 investment. You guys know, you guys take your girls around
Yep.
everywhere. I mean, you can put a down payment on a house with what you
Oh
pay
yeah.
for 1 year. It's no longer a positive ROI for college. Even if you get a half scholarship, you're just
Right.
making your money back, maybe. Now,
Yeah.
so you're fighting for an admission spot. I mean, that's a different conversation. Maybe we get there, but to me, it's, how do I encourage our kids to play club ball where you are going to play 2 more seasons per year? knowing that, the teams that are winning, whether that's Roswell, Buford, Walton, Lambert, leave Walton out of it. Let's look at those other ones. Look at Buford, Lambert, and Walton. Really, every single starter, and I would tell you almost every backup plays club ball. That played travel club. So if you look at it, and they're very senior heavy for the most part. Now they'll have some uber talented freshmen as well, but by volume on their varsity roster, most of the kids are juniors and seniors who have played a lot of club ball. If you look at the lifetime investment there, let's say for a senior to play on a Thunder Blue team or a 3D Red team or Team 91 Premier team, let's call it $10,000 a year after tuition. It's more than that. We know it's more than that, but let's say it's 10. But we're talking travel, flights, hotels, whatever.
Yeah.
If they play for 10 years, dude, that's $100,000 investment per kid.
Right.
You guys, I'm sure, have run the numbers. It's a much higher number than that. So even if it were just 100,000, that's $1 million team they're walking out there.
Right.
So you're competing. I mean, you start looking at it like salary cap in baseball.
Yeah.
We're a smaller market team. It's just hard to compete. Like if you go out there and you're playing versus a team of kids who play 2 extra seasons per year on average of really competitive ball. Credit to their parents, first of all, for doing it. Also, no shame on parents who decide that's not the right investment for them.
Right.
I get that too. But for us to go out there and play, let's say we add up all the seasons our kids have played. I bet if we played Roswell last year or BT, I bet you that they had another 40 seasons of experience on our kids. And you can see it in those small margins of like a ground ball situation or like whatever. So as a coach or a director of a program, you're always trying to say like, what can I provide in-house at cost or for free for our families to offer skill development and exposure to the game and foster a love for the game while also trying to retain kids who like to play multiple sports. Maybe it is Braden Gavin who plays hockey, who's 6'5" left-handed player. Let me tell you, if he played high-level club ball his whole life, he'd be a high-level D1 player. Easy.
Right. Yeah.
But I know that in order to keep him, he's got to know that his love is my priority. So like, I know he loves hockey. I'm never going to mess with him about that. Basketball players, it's the same thing. I'm not in a position really to scare those kids off. Football, same. I'm not in a position to tell a kid, "Hey, man, you can't go to quarterback camp because I need you for a DOT tournament."
Right.
So when you ask like what needs to line up, I think that we've addressed pretty much as we can, and you should really see it this year because this will be the 4th year of that youth initiative, and we're strong pretty much 1 to 10, and then we got the whole backups now. We're all set, but like it's taken 4 years of like very purposeful effort to try to get 10% better so that instead of losing to Lambert 7-5 in the Final Four, we end up hitting a couple of those shots. Or in 2021, where we probably had easily the best team in the state head to toe, but we can't win a faceoff. They're playing keep away for the entire game and we lose 6-4 or something. It's like what? So like that's a long-winded answer, man. But it's not a simple thing.
But it makes sense. Makes sense because my wife will always ask, well, what's the difference in like say River Ridge to everybody else? And I'm like, well, they just play all the time. Like there's that experience. They're spending more time doing the craft than any of our kids are. And so while we might have a kid or two that can probably, participate in those teams, right, and be a part of those teams, we don't have the depth of those teams. And you kind of put it in words of saying we haven't had the numbers, enough numbers to compete with those that have
that very last
exactly
hurdle, right?
Exactly. So makes sense.
Well, I'll offer you this too, Coach, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective, man. I know it's kind of an interview, but I don't want to just be the guy sitting here talking all the time. When you think about moats, there's 2 ways you can do it, right? You can look at where you're at now and what moat you have or don't have on the back end of this thing. So like it used to be, I'll put it this way, 2021 with 3 D1 attackmen, Braden Erksa, who's at Maryland now, Ethan Cox, who went on to play at Utah, and Andrew Atchison, who still playing at Denver. Unbelievable team, great to watch. We didn't win any faceoffs, but we scored 78% of the time we had the ball. So like pretty much every time, unless we hit a pipe or something like that, where somebody just blatantly dropped the ball, we pretty much scored every time. So like I think we might have lost 1 or 2 games there, ended up losing to Lambert, but like it took everything going right for them. Like we outshot them by a bunch and just had a terrible shooting day. They were
Right.
super mature, had a great game plan, and on offense, they executed. They also do a good job getting kids in as far as moving in town to school, which is, hey, listen, man, like at the end of the day, it happens in every sport, but like if
Sure.
people are willing to move there, that's a competitive advantage. Like if you
Right.
have houses or people that sell houses, or it's just a desirable program, or like Lambert where you just win year after year after year, it's bound to happen. So I mean, I'm not, yeah, whatever. They do a good job of filling in those gaps there. But the point is, we knew we didn't have a moat, even with that's like the pinnacle of what we could do as coaches is have 3 dudes going to those 3 schools playing attack. Like we can't really
Yeah.
do a whole lot more than that. So we had to then think about what can we do on the front end. Here's my question for you. Can you build a moat or a competitive advantage in the youth system that nobody can replicate because they're not brave enough, not because they're not able to? And so what we landed on is we're moving away from the whole rec ball and the fall system. We had to really reevaluate the calendar and like say basically if fall is when we're planning on teaching the game, which is historically the case, you're never going to get a single football player. So, like, what are we doing? Those are all obviously the best athletes. Everybody knows that. You're not going to fight City Hall on that. If you
Right.
think you're going to get all the best guys that just play lacrosse, you've made a mistake. That's just no. We live in Georgia. Like at the end of the day,
Right.
so like to me, it makes no sense for us to sign up for a rec league where our kids are going to play in a format that doesn't make sense to them. The field's too big. They touch the ball like 6 times a game.
Right.
Versus doing things like skill clinics that are at cost or free where our high school families and kids are coming in and putting those clinics on for the kids, teaching them the game. We're stringing the sticks and auditing all the pockets to make sure nobody has a crappy stick. And then we do a bunch of shooting and drills or whatever. And then we just play sixes, which is very open ended. And maybe we incentivize or add layers to the drill or constraints like, hey, if you set a pick, that goal is worth 2. If you set an off ball pick, it's worth 2. If you make 3 passes, it's worth 2. Whatever.
Right.
And they'll naturally, I mean, kids are just competitive. Now they can just drop in and play. We do it on Sundays instead of on Saturdays. So once
Right.
again, you get your football guys and you're good to go. So fall is really training. Winter is when we have to then put kids on the select team, which is tricky too, because like if you did have a kid coming out of a winter sport or a fall sport, they may not have ever played lacrosse, but be interested.
Right.
And your tryout is going to expose what their lack of experience. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. He's first year player. Like,
Right.
so my point is, what we try to do is be a lot more lenient in who we let play on the select team, prioritizing kids and families that are really committed athletes, transitioning the fall into a period of teaching rather than really a period of competition, and then having summer be when we're doing the introduction to the game, where we have all the triad clinics and things like that, where kids that are multi-sport guys can go. So we're actually trying to build a moat on the front end because I know a lot of booster clubs and coaches and things like that will not move away from the rec model. That's what we've always done. Well, I'm going to bet on us to teach our own kids, and I'll invite whatever other program, Roswell, Pope, Lassiter, or Walton, or Johns Creek, whatever it is. Hey, you guys want to have a play day where we combine for practice and
Yeah.
scrimmage? We can do that as much as we want. Why do we
Right.
need to have that regulated? Like it doesn't matter. Like we're just
Right.
playing, sign a waiver so that we're covered on insurance. I mean, what do you think about that, Coach? I mean, that's what we're trying to do to solve that.
Well, we're trying to rebuild our program right now, our youth program. Pretty much, obviously why Will played with you guys in the spring
Yeah.
was we just didn't have a program.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of doing what you're saying. We have opened it to elementary schools. Cherokee's been a little bit different. Cherokee County's been a little bit different where they've wanted us to send them through the rec program or the Parks and Rec program.
Yeah.
And so you kind of lose those kids.
Mhm.
But I don't know if you could say we're bucking the system, but we're like, no, we're gonna start a youth, and we might have, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 kids signed up right now, but it's gonna be teaching. It's gonna
Yeah.
be trying to get them to understand the game, how to play the game. All those intricacies that, like you said, lose when you have a rec program in the fall. Kids never played before. They come out and play. They can't pass and catch. They lose 30-0, and you never see them again.
Right.
So for us, that's what we're trying to do. And I'll tell you what, we don't have the numbers right now, but we're also fighting people that are like, well, why aren't we playing? Well, your kids never played before. Well, how are they going to learn the game? So I think there's an overestimate of saying you learn the game by playing. This might be where you get your more reps and you start to get that understanding of the game a little bit more. But the way I've also run my high school practices, we will fundamental you to death in practice every single day throughout the entire year because you come to the program and install your offense, the ball's going the other way if you can't pass a catch.
Mhm.
So for me, we're going to try, we're going to have to try to compete with teams by being, fundamentally sound. Now we're not obviously there or in that position, but I will never underestimate, fundamentals, and something I've learned. I played against Pete Milliman growing up and kind of got to, back in touch with him coaching in college and whatnot. And, myself and Mason Wren, who now went to Harrison, went to their coaches clinic in January, and they were doing a skills period, team skill period, where they're everybody is playing offense, everybody's playing defense, and they're doing their unsettled or settled stuff or whatever you want to do. And I'm like, Pete, what if your kids can't pass and catch? He's like, well, what's the point of putting them in line drills? You're not learning how to pass and catch either. So why don't you put them in a game situation, and now they're learning, you know, those game situations, how to move the ball one extra time while also learning to pass and catch. And you're putting your defenders in a situation where they have to play offense. So I've subscribed to it, and now we've lessened, our time of practice, where I've been a 2 hour guy, and now I'm like, okay, hour 15, we're getting it done, or we're moving on, and we'll attack it the next day. Because, when you don't have the skills and you're just kind of beating kids to death about, holy cow, catch a ball, and they
Yeah.
can't catch it,
Yeah.
you're getting crazy. They're getting crazy. They don't want to do it anymore. And so I've really kind of changed a little bit on how I've kind of approached that as I'm, getting into 20 plus years of coaching.
Yeah.
That, maybe less is more, and really combining the fundamentals with maybe some skill develop, or uh, game awareness is
Mhm.
probably going to be our best bet.
What I
Yeah.
think is, Greg, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I really like what you were saying about you kind of um, thinking outside the box and coming up with new strategies. Kind of relates back to what you were talking about your education at Macaulay. Like that's how they taught you to be. So it comes full
Yeah.
circle. But yeah, I think like in the hockey world, we always talk about we've got to build the triangle, right? The bigger base, and then as the kids age up, some kids decide not to play. And looking back with my kids, obviously I'm not a lacrosse coach. I never played lacrosse, but like when my kids went through the TYL, looking back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, we could have done this a little bit differently. We could have done this a little bit differently. And you just kind of, learn as you go. But you guys both having way more experience, like I really do like the fact that you're thinking outside the box and trying to recreate and solve the problems that you see that are holding you back a little bit. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, to Coach's point, I love where you're at with that. It's so funny. There's been like this paradigm shift from repetition towards like sort of a constraints-led approach where you're putting different parameters on a drill in context.
Yeah.
Um, and like there are some folks like you hear like Jamie Monroe talk a lot on his podcast about like
Yeah.
really going all the way to free play model and free play, and like
Yeah.
it's weird to me because like I feel like while I'm big on what you said, which is kind of a part whole thing where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're going to be in a lot of 5-on-4 or 6-on-5 or like 5-on-4 with the trailer or whatever. Let's start kind of here with this alignment, know these assignments, and now let's execute. And maybe there's 3 or 4 different paths that we might take
Right.
rather than the full chaos of, dude, just scrimmage a lot and they'll learn. To me, it's funny to me. Maybe that's just the football. It's definitely the football in me.
Yeah.
But,
For sure. For
that
sure.
was the predominant thing. And Coach Kenny Scholl, another man, I should put him at the top of the mentor list. I've been blessed with a lot of good mentors. I mean, Coach Scholl is basically like a grandfather to me. Because my family lived really far away. They lived in like Pennsylvania. So like I didn't, Coach Scholl was basically that for sure it is.
Yeah.
And he was a DB coach and a linebackers coach. And that is really where I learned the art of anticipating different permutations within a certain context. So it's like, some people will tell you being a great player is all about reactions. And that's why like box players are the best players. I said, no, you guys think that their ability came from the environment. It did, but those guys are freaks. I play with Mark Matthews and Randy Stads and like Lyle Thompson. I have seen that in real life. Let me tell you something. Those guys could have played, they could have played anything and they would have been great athletes. So you can't discount the fact that they are just innately talented and their play style was congruent with the environment. That is a perfect cocktail, uber 0.1% outcome. That is not a result of them just existing in chaos and everybody who exists in chaos is there. Most of the time, when you put kids in chaotic situations, like a practice where nobody can catch and they're being asked to scrimmage, you just learn bad habits and you learn to like basically not trust your teammates. Like as a lacrosse player, you shouldn't really be evaluating whether or not an open guy is going to be able to catch the ball. Like that's why we have kids from out of district. That's why Will Mandarano plays on our team, not just because I love him and I love you, but I know he made our guys better. Like he made our lacrosse players better because they knew they could throw it to a lefty who was going to make something happen when they got it. So like when I think about that practice style and that constraints-led approach, I'm probably still more on the, okay, let's do an advantage drill where we're practicing a high wing dodge and a guy's trailing you by 5 yards. And now we're going to script 1 of 3 off-ball actions. And we're going to do 5 reps of this, 5 reps of this, 5 reps of this. Now, player's choice, you guys just have to communicate it and we'll play best to 7 or something like that. Like I do something like that. Obviously, you need a little more depth to do something at that scale, but that's so resonant with what I've seen. And I actually think you have to be careful as a lacrosse coach these days with the way that people have almost like fetishized, like innovating as a coach. It's like, dude, like at some level, bro, like you got to play your right leverage and you've got to have the skill to do it. And more often than not, if it's a fast break or 3-on-2 on the backside, like it's going to be 1 of 3 things, not 1 of 14 things. So like, I don't need you practicing the things that are less likely to happen. That's sick that you're ready just in case. But like, I don't need a bunch of just in case guys. I need a bunch of most of the time guys.
And that's something I've done too, is kids get so used to doing drills. And so they play drills. And so I'm kind of a defensive coach by nature. So I wear the defenders out when they play a drill because they know what's going to happen. And I say, no, you're playing the drill. You got to play like this is a real life situation. So your teammate just got beat. Like this is a slide because your team not a 3-on-2. So you have to play the drill, like it's a real life situation. You can't play the drill to play the drill. So I'm big into that as well. So
All right. So, you talked a little bit earlier about, club lacrosse. What do you think club lacrosse is missing to make it better experience for players in Georgia?
Man, I'll tell you what, boy, that's $1 million question there. And by that, I mean, that is the question that private equity groups who are now acquiring these teams every year don't want anybody to have the answer to.
Yeah,
The answer is very simple. The answer is that it has to be player and family focused. And the answer is that we have to find a way for coaches to be able to avoid a conflict of interest when it comes to doing the right thing. Yeah. So like right now, and I can't blame them for it. There are a lot of coaches who make a full-time living coaching club ball or owning club teams, or whatever. And I know the numbers on it. And it's like staggering figures for these. I mean, relatively 6-figure, high 5s, 6 figures for a lot of these folks. And it's very tempting there to look at the whole ant farm and say, all right, this little ant who's like in its cog, I love you, ant, but like ultimately you're not the farm. I have to protect the farm instead of the ant. I get it. Like they have to do it. They try to do the right thing for most of the kids, and there's going to be some kids on the margins that don't fall within that, and the cookie cutter comes down, and those kids get choked off. That happens all the time. That was something that, having never had any equity in a club team, like by design, I have always very ardently pushed back against, and I've definitely been the squeaky wheel for sure. I know for sure when I was a Thunder, always whining about tryouts or why is this kid on this team instead of this team, or just because he's small doesn't mean. Our orange team, the second level team for Thunder, with the 2021 group, had, I bet you, 8 D1 players. I'll name them. Braden Erkser was on that team. Evan Plunkett was on that team. So these already, we're like,
Yeah.
That could never happen.
Yep.
Sean
Yep.
Byrne, starting goalie at Army. Thomas
Yep.
Lohman plays at Michigan. Let me see. Connor Moore played Lynchburg. Evan Voss, Player of the Year for Lenore Ryan, national champion. You know, that Carson Reeder played the Sacred Heart. The list goes on and on. Max Friz plays at Penn. There's a whole giant list, giant list. Sorry, guys, for all my boys that I'm not mentioning, but you know, there's just no way that we miss on that many kids if we have the right tryout process. And everybody did the best they could in the tryout within the time constraints that we had and the manpower. And, you know, it's hot out there. And like, you do see these kids over the course of the year. So you do have a good idea. But I've always felt like, you know, any kid missing or being marginalized is too many. And that's not realistic, probably, with an organization as big as these have become, whether it's Thunder or 3D or 91, especially, just those being the preeminent ones. Storm, Eagle Stick, same thing on the girls' side.
Yeah.
Southern Zone, right? Like when they get to a certain size, and I would tell you that is more than 2 teams per age group, it is no longer reasonable to expect every kid to be the priority versus the whole anthem. So I think what needs to happen is one of two things. Either the folks that are not affiliated with any club team need to step up and be mentors and coaches for those kids that are on the margins and those that are being successful in a more year-round way. So just being a community coach, being a referee, being a youth coach, being a, you know, shooting a bucket of balls on the weekend. Parents will pay you $30 or whatever it is to go out there. You know, they'll do it, but there's plenty of guys with lots of lacrosse experience and girls that are working at the desk 9 to 5 and hadn't touched their stick in 4 years. They need to step up because they, or rather, if they were to step up, I think there would be a much more, there would be much better coverage for these kids. I think the second part is the folks that are inside of these clubs, and they do this some, but I think they could definitely do it a lot more, need to make more of an effort to count from the top when it comes to players. The first conversation that folks typically have is what a kid can't do whenever they're picking teams. Well, he's small, or he can't shoot left hand, or he has a low IQ, or he's got this off ball, he gets lost. Okay, what about what he can do? How about that part? You know what I mean? And I think that when you have that type of attitude, it's then very easy to maximize every player. And if you're looking for the maximum aggregate product for those kids and that team, you're always going to pretty much make the right decision. Nobody's really going to argue with that. Like if you have a whole roster full of kids who do more things well than kids on the other team, you're fine. And then those kids on that second level team, so to speak, are going to then understand that they're also going to be put in a position to really succeed. So I think it's two parts. I think folks in the community need to step up and make sure that they're having an impact, however small they think it is. You know, impacting a life is never a small deal.
Right.
And then on the other side of it, these club directors need to be a little bit more cognizant of the natural proclivity to sort of think at the margins when you're running a business. And I know it's hard to decouple that. I don't think I'm above that. That's why I don't run a club team. I don't think I'm better than that at all.
Right.
And I don't. And I've seen lots of men I respect have seasons of life where they really fell into that trap, and then other seasons of life where they made up for it. But you know, the cost during those seasons where you think about the margins rather than the players, I think is a life in some cases. So it's like, you know, I've tried to, you know, in my own, you know, probably very annoying to some, almost vigilante way, create a little bit of a community. Their kids call it the dojo. They mess with me because a lot of the drills I have them do are very compartmentalized, very like wax on, wax off. They don't think it's going to translate. Then all of a sudden they hit a corner where they shake a guy next time they're on the field. There's a kid, Eric Molliver, who just transferred from Maryland to Duke, who was one of my original grasshoppers, so to speak. He's like, Coach, when are we going to the dojo again? So they call it the dojo. But what the dojo is really me trying to create a space for those kids to just experience a little bit of mentorship and trying to fill in some of the gaps that I think just come with the giant companies that some of these clubs are. Not to say that people aren't doing great work and impacting lives. I mean, shout out James Leary and his staff at 3D. I was very much intent on not coaching club ball anymore. After COVID, I felt like for me, it had just gotten pretty corporate, and no disrespect towards anyone, but it just wasn't really the right fit necessarily for me. And Leary was like, hey man, like a lot of these kids are kind of underdogs, but this is what we've been working on, and they're doing box and field, and there's all these different things you can learn and teach, and a whole new group of folks to impact. ever since I've been over there, I feel like every year he has done a great job leading that program and iterating towards something that is player and family focused. And obviously there's still room to go there. But
Yeah.
I think as far as giant private equity owned clubs, three-step clubs go, it's probably in as good a spot as you'll see. So I try to be the change I want to see a little bit there. But it's a great question, Glenn, and it's one that I take very seriously. So.
Well, thanks. That was a great answer. I mean, we've seen it ourselves, like going through like private clubs, then to the three-step, taking over and kind of the pros and cons of everything. But so moving on, like where do you see Georgia lacrosse in the next 5 years?
Man, that's an interesting one. I think it's going to depend a lot on the GHSA, how they allow things to scale. What I mean by that is, there's two things. Number one, you cannot coach your kids in the fall. So when you can't coach your kids in the fall, it's just always going to put a ceiling on how much skill you can ever develop with them. And so like for a school like Lassiter, where like, we really pride ourselves in our staff, and, I'd be remiss not to mention the unbelievable staff we've had over the years. The guys that are on our staff now, guys like Adam Goins, who you've already interviewed, Parker
Yep.
Berry, who's now the director at Milton, Bruckman, of course, Dylan Gross, Alex Crawford, all sorts of guys who've been and come through. And then the guys we have on staff now, we really pride ourselves on player development. Well, like for a school like ours and a staff like ours, or like Roswell or Lambert, really been able to amass like tons of dudes who really know what's going on. If we had the whole fall to practice, we would be in a whole different spot. So would those teams, so would a lot of different teams.
Yeah.
I think that's the number one thing throttling the forward development. The other piece is that no coaches who coach club ball can coach any of their kids in the off season, or they're not supposed to, or you can in the summer, but you can't in the fall. I think some coaches probably ignore that somewhat, or they just weigh the fine versus the opportunity. But for the most part, what that means is anytime that there's like a new vacancy for some of these club programs, or sorry, for some of these high school teams, it's very hard to get a guy who's really involved and knows the game in, because there's a chance that they've coached them over the last fall. So like Blessed Trinity, I know right now, Coach Parker has moved on to Creekview. I know that, they can't get a lot of probably the coaches that would want to go there, or that they would want to be there and help to really take that program to the stratosphere, because it's illegal. And you know what? Like, here's the thing. Would I go and like report somebody that I know is coaching BT kids in the fall for being a BT spring coach? No, I don't care. Like, listen, it is what it is. It happens every sport.
Right.
It's going to be a senior parent who's upset because they think that a freshman or sophomore who that new coach knows is playing over the senior. They're going to narc. And sure enough, that happened at Roswell a few years ago. Knocked them out of the playoff. They didn't get to play a game. One of their best teams ever. As good as these past couple teams have been, that team, I'll tell you right now, was better for sure. Did we beat them? but it was one of those things where my point is, where is lacrosse going to be? It'll continue to advance, but something's got to give with what they allow coaches to do. If the GHSA is intent on Georgia being a landmark state for lacrosse, which it could be, I don't think that's their priority. So what's going to happen is, I think the rich are going to get richer at the very top. I think the middle of the pack is going to grow. So there's going to be a lot more middle of the pack teams, but they're going to get probably slaughtered by the very best teams. And you've seen it at the youth level, where like even, I'll tell you, our Lassiter team last year, our 8th grade team, there has never been a team ever that was as good as that team in middle school that I have seen in my time here. It wasn't even, I'm not sure that they had a game within, I don't know, Coach, you probably saw a lot of those games.
Yeah, they were super talented. Yeah, for sure.
But that's the result of like kids aggregating to one. Like kids have moved to our school to play on that team. Now we've also hemorrhaged some to BT, ironically, but like that's happening at Lambert. I know almost as a response to that team, to Lambert losing, getting smoked, and there just being some houses available, like for like a bunch of very, very, very good 2028 ninth graders have moved there. So like, you just centralize this power in these different places. And it's going to come down to basically a continued battle at the top there with a more competitive middle third. Or what's going to happen is one of these private schools is going to hire like an unbelievable coach, and they're just going to say, we're just going to go recruit everyone we can. Right. So like if someone went to BT and they got all of our Lassiter kids, not just the 3 that went, and they got, continued to get Walton, who would I mean, they've missed out on probably 4 of their generational players going either to Macaulay or BT or somewhere else.
Right.
Not to mention a lot of these other schools. I mean, that's what would take us up. But I think it's going to be more of the same with a fatter middle third and a lot of opportunity for those kids in the middle third to get recruited. But I think that it's GHSA is going to determine how high we ever go, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was talked about when we talked with Molly and Adam, kind of the same sentiment. Like GHSA has to make some decisions.
We just don't have enough coaches, like you said, that have stepped up or aren't here to coach the kids. And
Yeah.
and that's where the kids are missing out. The programs are missing out is because they coach a team in the fall. They can't, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
we need the sport got way too big in Georgia too fast, and there weren't enough people to help coach it. And now we're seeing kind of the results of that,
Yeah.
where there probably could be some great programs in some great areas, but there's just not enough coaches to do that. And it's kind of it's not sad, but it's kind of a tough thing to see as a coach who's been coaching here for 20 years of, we've seen the growth in the sport, but we really haven't. I remember talking to Coach Busick and Coach Souza when we split, private and public. He
Mhm.
said you're still going to get the same few teams at the top, and sure enough, here we are. So we are sitting almost, let's see, 15 years later, and here we are in the same spot, the same programs with a sprinkle of here and there of teams being competitive for this reason or
Well,
that.
yeah, Lambert and Buford are the only two that are since I was in high school that are any different.
Yeah,
Like
and
all
it's
the rest of
yeah,
them at the top, I could not North
absolutely.
Paulding, credit to them as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah. Jason's
outside
done
of
a great
that,
job. Yeah,
Jason's done a great job. Yeah. But like
yeah,
outside of that, it's still Walton, Lassiter, Stars Mill,
yeah.
Westminster, Lovett, whatever.
It's
It's the
yeah,
same exact teams. I think the other piece there too is boarding schools are making off like bandits off Georgia kids because what's happening is all these kids are going and playing club ball year round. I really know this for 2 reasons because A, I'm still like pretty tight with the Macaulay staff, and they come
mhm,
down here all the time and they find kids that are hidden gems that are supposed to go to Woodstock High School or River Ridge High School or
right,
whatever.
right.
And it's like, look, man, like, with Will coming up, like you're building a program, you got to figure out like, all right, is this, and my dad was in the same spot. He almost sent me to McDonough. He was like, is this my son's cross to bear? Like,
Right.
is this something where like, is this like TJ could help transform what we're doing at Macaulay? Will could help transform what's going on at River Ridge. Lacey can help transform what's going on for Lassiter's women's program. But I could also send her to McDonough. I could also send him to Macaulay. I could also send him to BT. I could also, have sent TJ to wherever. And it's like, that's a tough one as a parent. I'm not a parent, so I don't know that decision. But it's like, at some level, man, you don't really owe it to a school to invest your kid's lifespan into that. And that's like it's kind of as a coach, what you have to do, you have to ask parents, you have to inspire parents to say, there is no better way to invest these 4 years of my kid's life than being around you, coach, all the time. And that leads right back into that mentorship in the off-season piece where, yeah, you can
Yeah,
do some stuff, but if we were able to be out there with those kids in the fall, the impact it would make, like the trouble that they wouldn't get in, like
right.
that sort of stuff. And
Absolutely.
so anyway, man, that's it. God, yeah, you're right, dude. It's 20 years later, like we're still. Like I
Yeah,
remember
and
playing
it's
against
it's just
Lassiter, and I was not.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. My daughter, playing at River Ridge. I
Yeah,
mean, I've made my decisions after I left college to be more centered around my kids, and so my decisions on where I've been coaching have been, okay, where are my kids? They're in Cherokee County. Okay, I need to get to Cherokee County. Okay, now the job opened at River Ridge. Okay, my kids are going to River Ridge. I'm going to go to River Ridge. And so, I think my daughter has learned a lot about helping a program
yeah,
achieve success, but also, learning the struggles as well. And she was fortunate enough to play, in the Storm program with a bunch of great players, and kind of three others that have kind of been really close friends during that time, and it's made a big impact on her play. But I think she's also helped raise the play at River Ridge. I don't want to
Yeah.
say it's my daughter that's been the difference, but
No, been a
she's
catalyst there,
helped
certainly.
raise that level of play. And you know, I just want to see more people help and grow the game. And you know, we're where we are 20 years ago when there were 30. My first year when we won it, 30 teams played. We're
Yeah.
still in that same spot. And that's where we've seen Texas change a little bit.
Yeah.
That's where we've seen Florida change a little bit. And we just haven't had that change.
Yeah. Traffic doesn't help either because there's a lot of dudes that live in Buckhead that would love to
Amen.
coach who are sitting on
Let me
75.
tell you,
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of guys that are like, I'm in Buckhead. And I'm like, I don't blame you.
I'm just dumb enough to pay for the gas. That's the difference.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, your old car, you got to stop each time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Each
well, I
way you
recently upgraded. My Tahoe was 22 on the highway.
There you go. So one of our other staple questions we'd like to ask everybody is there any rules changes you'd like to see in the game?
Oh yeah, interesting. Easy answer. I'd love a shot clock. I mean, I will tell you right now, and I messed with Rick Lewis about this. Rick Lewis Sr., his son,
Yeah.
Ricky, was my age, one of my good friends, but I messed with him and Eric Tompkins, who's another Lambert coach, said, man, I tell you what, boys, y'all owe me about 3 rings if we'd had a shot clock. I'm telling you, there is it's like the SEALs on the job when Lambert gets a lead by about 3 in a championship. Oh, you're not getting it back. Never.
Mhm.
Never.
Yeah,
It's
I've
like,
seen that on the girls' side too. Yeah.
yeah, Milton, same thing. They do the same deal. They'll
Yeah.
run around and they'll take advantage. But hey, you're just leveraging the game. Like you can't begrudge somebody for doing that.
No,
I do
absolutely
think
not.
it would force coaches, man, like to get so much better and players get so much better. And some of these teams that like hide behind just a deeper player pool would get smoked if they had to actually deal with other teams' best player way more often. Like if if all you had to do, coach, play 90 seconds of defense, I just know right now, you guys versus this year, where based on youth program, whatever, there's probably a pretty big disparity in talent at the top.
Yeah.
You guys would absolutely make 10 to 15 stops in that game, just off of okay, this time we're going to funnel them to the inside. We're going to throw them off. We're going to slide in the back of the head. We're going to slide 2 guys and rotate to the open dude. Just things like that. Like you can outcoach a team. Now it gets a lot more similar to football or basketball where you're playing possession to possession and you have to be way better coordinated. And like the base really, from a shot clock standpoint, and this is something I observed, like moving from the NCAA at the time where there wasn't one, which was also a yawn fest where Denver would sit there on the ball, dude, versus us. I was playing D-mid. I'd sit there for like 4 minutes, get inverted like legitimately 6 times. I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing out here? Maryland would do the same thing. What I saw when I got to the MLL with the shot clock is that the most coordinated, highest chemistry team with like the best 1 or 2 guys almost always won. They almost always did because that great offensive player can create leverage the first time they dodge. They don't need to roll back 5 times. They don't need to like bounce out and redodge and do all this random stuff. Like it used to be you'd score by attrition. Now these days with the shot clock, it's you score because of your ability and your ability to play with your teammates. Conversely, on the defensive side, teams with a real eraser, like he can basically unilaterally stifle an entire other team because if they don't have that one guy at the tip of the spear who's really making things happen, that they're not good enough elsewhere. And you see, like defensively in the game of lacrosse, coach, you'll love this. I'm a little bit of a historian and a nerd for the game. My dad went to all those things. We have all the championship productions, DVDs, and all the convention notes and whatever.
Yeah.
Like when you see the lacrosse game go from sort of a near man slide type operation, which it was pre-Bill Tierney, I'll say. So like late 80s, early 90s, where it was, it's organized, but it's really just very chemistry led defensively to something where there's a designated crease slide and a pre-rotation and a recovery, early quick slide, which is kind of a Tierney style, all the way up from like 95 until like mid 2000, late 2000s, kind of when I got into school when Notre Dame popularized like kind of a hedge and recover because all the offenses were based off of a square geometry where it was a pass, like a dodge, pass, dodge, get an extra guy on the backside to beat a quick slide. Now you have to discern whether or not it's a hedge or a slide. Well, now offensive coordinators that weren't prepared for that move the ball when they shouldn't and shoot when they should have moved it. Okay, now the game has moved to where adjacent players, instead of clearing through, are fading and gaining leverage through X or across the top. So now you punish a hedge just as much as a slide. And now, so the point is, it cascades over time. And I do think that the singularity there at the end of that, or the final endpoint, is pretty much a 2-point line and a shot clock, because now there's no defense that's really safe, but there's also no offense that's going to solve every defense. So
Right.
every coach is going to have to do a great job of preparing leaders on his team, or her team, in order to really be effective. So I'd love to see the combination of those two. If I could pick one, I would take a shot clock. But I think that is like something that is creating. You talk about a moat. Those states that have shot clocks, when you see those kids play in all these events that we play in, you can tell the teams from Maryland and from like New England that play with a shot clock versus our teams. And then when we play a team that, is equally talented, but from a non-shot clock state, it's like, all right, this is manageable. Whenever we play those teams that are going and they're not messing around and attacking or dodging poles, they're not just like waiting for a short stick. I'm like, whoa, okay, we got to really deal with these guys. Like, this is.
I know the argument is always like, well, those teams that don't, that can't play, offense very well, they don't have the players, and it puts the game back and no one grows. My argument for that is we're going to turn the ball over no matter what.
Yeah.
Now there's a quicker time where they could get the ball back to maybe kill the ball, kill the clock for 90 seconds or however long they decide to do it. But if you're not that great and you don't have the talented players, you're turning the ball over anyways, whether you have a clock or not. And now the other team is just sitting on it and not, kind of,
They bait you into having to overplay.
Yeah, or teams regress because they're holding the ball because they don't want to make it look bad. That's worse. I'd rather you go down, score in 30 seconds, and then maybe we get an opportunity somehow, some other way to get the ball back, and now maybe we can have a chance. But we're going to turn the ball over one way or the other. So I'm agree, and I disagree with. Well, the teams that don't have a good players, you're gonna make it, go backwards. I disagree with that.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. I think that the other piece too is just I'd love to see a couple of coaches do their best work. I think so many coaches, and I'll just use Lambert. I'll name drop Lambert because I have such respect for Rich and Coach Lewis and Timmy Guerin and Coach Tompkins and all those guys who are part of that column master, like all the way down. I go on and on. Coach Kesselring does a great job, but like they have never put their best product on turf. Probably 2018 is the only year I can remember where it was like, wow, these guys are putting the foot on the gas and they're scoring 20 a game. And it was awesome. It was like, wow, everybody got better. Like, even just watch them. Like, they whipped our ass in the state championship. We thought we were going to kill them. Man, let me tell you, that was dead wrong. That was absolutely It's on YouTube for anybody in the audience who wants to see it. Like, I mean, you wonder about like what some of those teams could have done and could have looked like and could have been if the coaches weren't incentivized to be a winner first and to be their best second, I guess, so to speak. Like Westminster, like how many championships has Coach Souza won? 1,000,000. How many of those did they stall out the last 5 minutes of the game? Probably 500,000. So it's like ultimately, like, what could those kids have ever been? And then they get to college and people wonder why, like, man, there's never really been like a great, like, I mean, there have been very good, but like for as many championships as like Lambert has won, or like Walton has won, or whatever, or Westminster has won. Where are all the All-American? Like, where are the guys? And people gave Brian Wallace a lot of stick for a long time at Centennial because they'd score 1,000,000 goals and they would never win the big one because it just wouldn't line up on the day, or they'd lose by a goal to Lambert or something like that. But let me tell you what, B-Wall has coached as many or more collegiate studs than anybody, because their teams play fast and they play to their potential. And those boys go to college and are great, great players. We try to do the same thing at Lassiter, where, for the rings I don't have, I have that many collegiate, all conference, all American players. So I'll take it.
Right.
So, we'll figure it out. It's a, the shot clock though, man, you get me riled up on that one. I'd love to see that. Give me that in time machine. I'll be in a good spot.
We'll get a full episode on the shot clock next time.
That's right.
So anyway, I mean, it's been great talking to you. We really appreciate your time. we hope to get you back on again in the future. So
Yeah, fellas. Hey, I appreciate it, man. Sorry it took so long.
No,
I
it's
think I'm
great,
all
man.
hopped up on caffeine. This is a great
No,
conversation, man. I enjoyed it.
we enjoy it. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do,
yeah,
grow the
absolutely.
game and getting people involved and you have you have a great energy for it and you're a chip off the old block from your dad and I know your dad continues to do great things for kids and you guys are great understanding of kids and you're obviously doing the same thing, so we really appreciate it and wish you the best of luck this spring.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, fellas. Anytime.
All right,
All right.
take care.
Thanks, TJ.
Yeah. Thank you. See ya.